But the robber barons at the time of Magna Carta relied on wood. And so he took the woods of England to himself. And the commoners who used to use the woods, especially the female, the women of the Middle Ages, were central to the commons. And in fact, the women were central to commoning practices in England for the next centuries, right until the 19th. And you can still find this around the world today, where there's commoning. In North Korea, in Mexico, in Brazil, perhaps in Venezuela. Wherever there's commoning, you will, in Nigeria or in Kenya. There are several generations of English social historians. It's people like me, students of Edward Thompson, who have described the criminalization of commoning, or have described the survival of commoning. And when you read it, it always seems like long ago, or far away, or cute, or valuable for the heritage industry, or some good way to help cause tourism in this or that parish of the old England. You know what I'm saying? I need to wet my whistle. Thank you. What is this commoning? In 1940, in England, the Picture Post said, "We believe that after the war, certain things will be common ground among all political parties. It will be common ground that every man, woman, and child shall be assured of enough food of the right kinds to maintain him in full bodily health and fitness. It will be common ground that we must reform our system of education so that every child is assured of the fullest education he can profit by. It will be common ground that our state medical service must be developed so as to foster health, not merely battle with disease." A new political party was started in England called the Commonwealth Party. Their slogan was common ownership. Woody Guthrie said, "When there shall be no want among you because you'll own everything in common. When the rich will give their goods unto the poor." I believe this way, to own everything in common, Woody Guthrie said. Commons means all of us. This is old commonism. And in truth, the first translator of the English Bible, John Wycliffe, had translated Acts 2, verse 44, to have all things in common. A wording that has been kept in all subsequent renditions. And the early Christians had all things common, as every man his need. Do you hear that? Can you hear in it Marx's later definition of communism, to each according to his need? I'm talking here of a very old human ideal. But I'm also talking of a very old and very pervasive and very deep human practice. A practice of mutuality. And to understand that practice, we need to know words such as estovers. Because when practices have gone, the language describing them has gone too. And if we wish to reclaim a commons and reclaim human mutuality, we're not going to be able to do it in the old language of privatization. Marcus, how's the time going?
5 more minutes.
Is that all? Let me check something. we'll manage. I guess there was a poem I wanted to read by Edward Thompson. How the called a place called Choice, and he saw on the wall of the old handloom weaver, he saw shadows cast by the rushlight, shadows of previous strugglers, parliamentary struggle like Ernest Jones, Luddite struggle like Meller at Cartwright's Mill. All right. There's the heroes of the labor's past. But the rushlight, what's that? It's a blue flame caused by rushes. Rushes are reeds. You get them down by the river. You take off the bark. There's a pulp inside. You soak the pulp in animal fat, and you have yourself a substitute for a candle. You can read at night. Light came from the commons. Do you follow? I'll explain to you in detail later then. This is the way they made their light. It was from rushlight candles. I wanted to quote this poem because when I went off to England to meet Edward, I read a book called The People of the Reeds. The people of the Reeds are at the cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia, aren't they? Between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And the wars of Bush and the oil wars, the grabbing for the hydrocarbon energy resources by the privatizers, destroyed the people of the Reeds. So it's just a poetic link, do you follow? Between one commons in one part of the world and another commons in another part of the world. And how when we speak of the English history, it's not gone. The expropriations continue in our lifetime. And we see that with the Reeds. So that was one thing I wanted to put in. And then another thing I wanted to put in that might even be worth stretching our time a little bit, if I could beg your patience, is the freedom of want. Remember the 4 freedoms. Can we just have it? Everybody do these 4 freedoms. Nobody's going to leave here without this test. Let's have a review. Freedom of speech. Freedom of religion. Freedom from fear. And freedom from want. Okay, who's a student here? Come on, profs. Everybody. All right, we won't forget these 4 freedoms, all right? We could just... All right. Now, but what is this freedom of want? It's not estovers, pannage. Pannage is letting your pig go into the forest. It's not chiminage, that's using roads without having to pay a toll. It's not estovers, that's being able to get some wood for your fuel. No, freedom from want. What is that? It's just, how do we translate it into food stamps, into health insurance, into subsidized housing? How do we translate it into to our lives? An effort was made in the 1930s in our struggles. An effort was made in the 1940s to translate that commons into something through the state as a guarantee. And it was a man from the Philippines, Carlos Bulosan. Who's heard of him? I'd never heard of him until 2 weeks ago. He wrote the essay in the Saturday Evening Post in 1943 on the freedom from want. This man from the Philippines, who'd come at the age of 16 to America, to Seattle, then went up to Alaska to work in the canneries, worked in the factories of the fields, all up and down the West Coast, as a teenager, until he got tuberculosis. Ended up in the hospital, became a writer, wrote a wonderful book called America is in the Heart, which I'll read in a minute. Oh no, I won't read the whole novel. He speaks for equal opportunity to serve themselves and each other according to their needs and abilities. That's Carlos Bulosan writing in 1943. You can hear the echo of Wycliffe. You notice he writes not of work or labor, but of service. He continues, but we're not really free unless we use what we produce. So he's not writing about possessions and gaining more, but what can be used.